You're now on the road beyond. Welcome to the show. We're going to take you to places both near and far. And I want to welcome my co-host, Ike McFadden, who's joining me here on the show. Ike, it's good to see you. You know, we're doing something a little bit different today. We're live on Facebook.
Awesome. It's a good thing I'm sober.
Good thing Ike's not had a few. So there you go. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. And if you're watching us live on Facebook, the intention is every Wednesday around 7 o'clock, we're going to bring you a few new episodes of the show. And we'd like to grow our audience. So if you're watching us live, please share this podcast. We need the viewers. We need you to keep watching to bring you these live shows. And if you don't catch the live show, no problem. It'll live on Facebook, on our Facebook page. We got a Facebook page this week, Ike. You know, we're now the Road Beyond podcast.
That's, yeah, I was hoping we were going to get a MySpace page, but Facebook's okay
too. No MySpace. Are you okay over there? Are you dropping things?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. No MySpace page, but we got a Facebook. We got a Twitter account. You can find us on Twitter, and you can watch the shows on our YouTube channel as well. That's right. Anytime you can watch us on YouTube. All right. Let's get into the show tonight because we've got a good one for you. We're talking one of your favorite subjects, Ike, UFOs.
Yeah. Well, you say favorite. I mean, it's something that I'd like to believe in. I have to say, as sort of the resident skeptic, I haven't seen a lot of good information on this, or at least convincing information, but I'm open-minded. Tonight we've got Butch Witkowski. He is the director and founder of the UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania, editor of Journal of Alien Abduction Research, and he's a member of half a dozen or so other related research groups, and he's also a former law enforcement officer. Welcome to the show, Butch. Tell us a little bit about your research center, if you will.
Well, thanks for having me on. The research center started in 2009. I was a member of MUFON, chief investigator for the state of Pennsylvania, state section director, STAR team member, but I just wasn't getting what I was after. It boiled down to, you know, doing the interview or going to the scene, filling out a report, and that was pretty much the end of the whole deal. And I just thought it should carry on further and more involved. And I started the research center with a group of like-minded researchers, and it's been going on ever since 2009. We're in Europe, in 2 countries. We are in 12 states right now. And also being a member of the Phantoms and Monsters 40 team, we get involved in everything. And to answer your question about being a little skeptical there, it's good to be a skeptical believer. And that's pretty much where I put my class. I'm a skeptical believer. I need to see the evidence.
Butch, I want to ask you, you had a personal experience with UFO sighting. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that happened. That was really the beginning of it all. In 1989, living in Tucson, Arizona, had some fellows over from the college putting in some saguaro cactus on the property. And it was around 7 o'clock at night. It was hot. My wife went in and got some iced tea for everybody. So there were about 7 of us standing outside. And I went to take a swig of the tea, and everybody was like looking up, and I'm going like, wow, what did I miss? And I looked up, and above a mountain, there was this craft, and it was at least 3 football fields in length. It was 4, maybe 5, 6 stories high, burnt copper in color, had a couple faint green lights on it. It was just hovering above the mountain, maybe 1,500, 2,000 feet. And I'm looking at everybody's looking at it. My neighbor across the street, who was head of federal prisons for the government, he was out looking at it. My next door neighbor was a doctor. He was looking at it. So and we looked at it for a good minute and a half, 2 minutes. It slowly rose up and just shot off to the west so fast I couldn't even believe it. So I got into the house after talking to everybody, and they see what I saw was I just hallucinating from my wife's iced tea. And I called everybody. I called every media outlet. I called the Tucson City Police. I called the DPS, Department of Public Safety. I called Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I called the airports. I called everybody I could think of. Nobody saw this thing, but all of us did. and everybody saw exactly what I saw.
So this was something that was mechanical, or it was a series of lights, or can you describe it just a little bit more?
It was almost tube shaped, but kind of blunted on the ends, more like your classic saucer, but higher, not as thin in size. And it was totally silent. There was no electrical interference at any time or anything like that. It just hovered. It just like floated up and down. And I guess when you're looking at it that way, it was like it was moving up and down a few inches, but I'm sure it was a couple hundred feet it was moving up and down. And totally silent. There was nothing coming from that craft. And when it shot off, it was just like a blur. I mean, it just rose up and gone that quick.
But, we're seeing now more and more videos of craft, even the Navy releasing these Tic Tac videos over the last few years. Mm-hmm. And we've talked to at least one expert on this show before, in his theory that these craft are not necessarily extraterrestrial, but are terrestrial. What is your theory on this?
That's possible. I mean, that's very possible. I think what kills that claim a little bit is we were doing a bit of research. We go down to a local, it's one of the dark skies in Pennsylvania, darkest skies in the USA. And we do our equipment testing down there. And, we set up everything out of the Beagle, get everything hooked up. And I was standing there talking to a state trooper, and we had seen at that point when he pulled in, maybe 5 or 6 sightings of something we couldn't describe. And then he looked at me and I was facing him and he said, well, look behind you. Do you ever see anything like that? And when you can see something cross from horizon to horizon, which is a pretty big span where this state park is, in a matter of probably a second or less, we don't have anything like that. I mean, if we had anything like that, it would be crazy. So I'm talking to him. I said, do you see much of that? And he said, oh, yeah. And then lo and behold, he said, well, what about that one? He turned around again, and one's coming from east going west, stops in midair, drops down, kind of makes a big U shape, comes up, and then takes off again. So there are things out there we can't explain. We don't know what they are. Nobody knows what they are. Right. And nobody knows who's piloting them, even if they're just not piloted and just mechanical.
So let me ask you a question. I understand you work for with the Mutual UFO Network. Yeah. I believe that's a fairly old and fairly respected reporting network. What exactly is your role there, and what goes on with that?
Well, I'm not with them anymore. I left in 2009, but I was a chief investigator for the state of Pennsylvania, state section director, and a STAR team member. MUFON receives calls via the internet mostly, and those calls go out to the relative states, and then the state section director or the state chief investigator turns those reports over to one of the field researchers, and they do all the contact work, and then it goes back, and it just goes into a system called CMS. And then those things are posted. I mean, you can go online and look at them.
May I ask why you said you left in 2009 or so? What was the reason for that?
It was just I wasn't getting the information. I wanted more. I wasn't satisfied with, reading a report and filing it in a system. I wanted to go to the scene. I wanted to talk to the people face to face. I wanted to see the evidence. Especially when people said they had like a circle burned in their yard or something like that. Well, telling me about it and me going to the scene and seeing it and sampling it, which normally usually turns out to be some kind of a disease that the grass had. But, just getting something on paper, looking at it on paper and filing it was just not getting the answer. And this whole thing is about, we're all looking for the truth. I mean, we're all skeptic to a point. But it is one of those things where I've come to the conclusion that the paranormal, cryptozoology, and ufology, they're all the same. They all have similar ramifications, both in the reporting and in the investigation types that people do.
What do you mean by that when you say they're all the same? What exactly, I mean, if you don't mind expanding on that a bit.
No. In the paranormal, there have been the ghost groups or whoever's doing the paranormal investigation, they'll go out and in a number of cases, something's going on on the property or in the property they're located, and in the sky, there's something else going on. Like bright lights are followed by something happening in the house. An unknown craft flying across above a cemetery all of a sudden makes cameras and stuff go wild. In cryptozoology, you have the biggest thing now that a lot of researchers are looking into and trying to get an answer to is you have reports where a Bigfoot or some other type of creature is seen in a wooded area. There's a flash of light and it disappears.
Yeah.
Or there's a flash of light and it appears. So what's the flash of light? I mean, does that lead credence to the interdimensional theory? Nobody knows. We don't even know what the interdimensional theory is. There's a lot of good researchers working on that. I hope sooner or later they come up with an answer. But the flash of light really bugs me because we had a bipedal canine sighting of two gentlemen, and it was a very long sighting of this creature. And they said when they got around it on the highway, it was eating roadkill. And when they got around it after it stood up, and he said it looked like a silver aura around it. Now, he said that could have been the headlights flashing against the fur, but he said it wasn't that type of, he said that would have been very noticeable. What he did notice was that it was just an aura of light around the creature. So what's with the light? You know, why are people seeing this? These reports at one time were just coming in by people, you know, hiking, this, that, and the other thing. Now they're coming in from law enforcement. They're coming in from park rangers. You know, they're coming in from investigators that I have a lot of credence in that, you know, they know what they're doing.
So, Butch, let me ask you one more question. And again, you know, forgive me for my ignorance on this, but I've heard people say things like interdimensional. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I guess that when people, it only started a few years back where people weren't, Bigfoot researchers were not getting the answers. We're not coming up with the proof that these things existed. But there were reports, many of them, where they were following footprints in the snow in an open field.
Yeah.
And the footprints just stopped. They disappeared. There's no place for it to go. There was no like a wooded area or a highway or anything like that they could have booked to. But this, you know, you got a track that's, the stride is 6 foot. I'm 6'1". I couldn't make a 6 foot stride if I tried, unless I jumped. But, you know, you got a 6 foot stride of footprints and they're numerous, and then they stop out of nowhere. The ground isn't changed. It's still snowy, it's snow covered. And then you have the reports where people say they see something, they start to describe it, and then it just kind of disappears. Or they're actually got something on video, and you know, they'll take some still pictures with a camera, and the still pictures kind of show a blurry figure in the woods. The video shows zip, nothing at all.
You know, Butch, I'm glad you brought up the cryptozoology connection because it seems to be a controversial subject, especially for people who just focus on cryptozoology. We had Ken Gerhard on one of our shows about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I asked him outright because I'd seen the book that was recently published about Bigfoot being tied into UFO sightings, and I asked him his thoughts about that, and he was adamantly against it. He said, look, you know, I think Bigfoot is a living, breathing creature that has nothing paranormal about it. And I think that people want to tie in UFO and paranormal to Bigfoot just to validate their theories. Do you find that it's a controversial opinion to tie in Bigfoot to UFOs?
Well, we don't even know if Bigfoot exists.
Yeah.
That's number one. We do know that UFOs exist. That's number two. And number three, I don't see any evidence or anything related to that they couldn't be tied in. There's just too many reports out there where odd things happen, especially in the cryptozoology field, where not only prints, but they still have no DNA on this animal or whatever it is. And but you can't call everybody a liar. I mean,
right.
These people get out there, and to date we have like 59 bipedal canine reports in Pennsylvania within our lichen loop, which is just a research area. We have none outside of that. But how, when I did my background research on the first two, I come up with a newspaper report from 1868 in the Erie New Era, I believe it was called, where a farmer's animals were being attacked. He goes out, he takes a shot at this thing. He gets into town, gets to the local constable and the newspaper, and describes exactly the same creature that I get today. Size, height, color, everything. So they've been around for a long time.
Calling him Bigfoot back then, they were calling him wild men.
Yeah, wild men, men of the woods.
Yep.
We had no idea. I mean, when you look back at the indigenous for thousands of years, I guess, I mean, they have drawings in caves and on walls of these creatures. So, until we find one, until we have one, until we have the DNA and prove what they are or what they're not, another story.
Well, Butch, let me ask you something. You mentioned, and I'm going to go back to UFOs for a bit here.
Yeah.
You mentioned this sighting that you had, and now I know, sort of in the court of law, generally speaking, human testimony is not considered the most reliable thing in the world for people who are skeptical. What would you say to someone who says, well, we've got these reports of various things and humans aren't very reliable, so we can't read too much into it? What would you say to that, and why do we not have something a little more solid at this point?
Well, that would take me to another report, another sighting, where I was leaving work and standing outside talking to a couple fellows, and we were watching a light in the distance, but it was coming toward us. It was very bright, very, very bright white. And then it kind of just slowed down, turned bright cherry red, and shot up into the sky. So I went home, and when I got home, I made the report and put it in CMS. One of my investigators called me and said, did you just see this report of this craft? And I said, yes, I saw it. And he said, well, who put that in there? I said, well, I did. I saw it. And I said, with 4 other guys. And I said, they're all listed there. And he said, hold on to your seat and go to the next page. I put an addition onto it. So when I went to the next page, a couple 75 miles away from where I was unloading something out of their station wagon, witnessed exactly the same thing, same craft, same motion, same color change. Mine was at 6:01. Their sighting was at 6:02.
Amazing. Yeah. 2 non-corroborated witnesses reporting exactly the same thing. Yeah. His name is Butch Witkowski. He's the director and founder of the UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania. Butch, where can people find you? Website, Facebook page? Where can they get more information on you?
The best place is Facebook. All the sites are on the UFO Research Center. PA is on there. U4COP is on there. My personal page is on there. There's all kinds of contact numbers and email addresses they can get me. If they need help with any research or background research, we don't charge anybody anything for that, or if they have pictures they want us to go over, we have our own photo lab. So, that's the best way to get me through Facebook.
Butch, we want to thank you for joining us on the show this evening, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. We want to have you on again in the near future.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, Ike, always fascinating. And I think Butch kind of nailed it, really hit it on the head by just saying the statement. There are things flying around in the sky. The U.S. Navy's seen them. Military experts have seen them. People out on the streets are seeing them. No one can explain what they are. And the thing that's different now than it was, say, 50 years ago is we've all got cell phones and videos. The videos are getting out there, folks. You just got to look for them. Well,
and let me push back a little bit on that, in that, One of the classic things you hear about UFOs is, well, just because something is unidentified doesn't necessarily mean it's alien origin or from Mars.
Well, exactly.
So, I keep coming back to the idea of, as you said, we all have these HD cameras in our pockets these days, and I keep waiting for something that's sort of undeniably non-blurry, and I have yet to see it. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I found a picture. I'm going to show you in a future show coming up, maybe later tonight. We'll see it on one of our episodes. But there's a lot of things out there. What the most impressive video I think I've seen in years was the stuff the U.S. Navy released, with these Tic Tac craft that are doing mind-boggling, turns, 90-degree turns at thousands of miles an hour, something that we just haven't been able to build yet, or maybe we don't know about. But I also go back to what one of our former guests, Daryl Sims, said. He's thinking that these things aren't necessarily from outer space. Let's quit thinking they're coming here from Mars or another dimension. They could be here on Earth. We just don't know what they are yet.
Well, that would be interesting. I mean, as you know, I don't have a ton of faith in our governments. So the idea that they're hyper competent in some area, that they've displayed not a great amount of competence elsewhere. I mean, I would actually be relieved to learn that.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have more guests on in the future talking UFOs. And you wanted to get a ufologist, and what was the other guest you want to bring on at the same time?
A urologist. I thought those would be excellent.
One show will do that as well. And we've got to get that ghost box on as well. I'm going to talk with our producer, Pete, and get a ghost box on in the near future. All right. It's time for the news, folks. Here's a look at some of the weird, tantalizing, and just plain bizarre stories posted from our partners at the Full Spectrum Project. Find them on Facebook. All right, Ike, you ready for the stories for today? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we'll take a look at a few of these.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. First story of the day, and we're going to get to one came from National Geographic magazine. All right. I don't know if you heard on what is going on in Vancouver, but they keep finding feet washing up on their shores. I've heard about this in the news years ago. It's been in the news, but they found more than, I think, close to 24 feet separately have washed on shores. This started in 2007, Ike, when a young girl was walking, a 12-year-old girl was walking along the beach, finds a shoe in a sneaker. People start thinking, well, that's just bizarre. Where did the shoe come from? A few weeks later, they find another foot in a shoe on the beach. And this is all on the same location, and it's off of a location called the Salish Sea, and it's just near Vancouver and close to Seattle. Then over years, more feet keep washing up on this beach. So what the hell's going on there in Vancouver?
Well, I don't know. When you sent me the original link, I have to admit, I looked at the headline and I thought it said people were washing their feet in the ocean. So what was the explanation behind this?
So they went through a long, lengthy process. They were thinking it was a serial killer, maybe Bigfoot, sharks, eating the body and the feet just wash up. Well, the common theory, they did some research. They wanted to use cadavers, but that's kind of inhumane and disrespectful to even cadavers. So instead of human cadavers, they used pigs. And they did some research where they threw pigs out in the sea, dead pigs, and to see how things would deteriorate. Well, long story short, they were finding that the human body deteriorates. The shoe is still attached to the foot, so they naturally come off the body as the body is deteriorating, all right, decaying, and float to the top because guess what? Modern day shoes are buoyant. That's right, folks. So these shoes were washing up on the beach. They did some DNA search, and the weirdest thing they found is one of the shoes belonged to a hiker who disappeared in 1985. Well, it washed ashore in 2011. So why are they all appearing in Vancouver? Well, they say it's all sea currents, and they were able to trace that as well. So they've solved the mystery of the feet washing on the sea washing on the beach in Vancouver. Next story of the night, Ike, and you'll like this one. This comes from our friends at higgypop.com. Haven't heard of them. But why don't we ever see the ghosts of cavemen, Neanderthals, and early hominids? Ever thought about that?
I hadn't, although it does make sense that theoretically, if we're seeing spirits of departed people, you'd see, the entire human history of, you'd see Romans, you'd see Greeks, you'd see cavemen, you'd see everything. And I guess that's the case.
Well, they kind of said, well, maybe it has to do with ghost with human intelligence. And in order to be a ghost, you have to have a certain amount of intelligence. And early human beings didn't have that intelligence. That was one theory. I don't know. The theory I'm going to go with is that all the romantic writers who wrote about ghosts came around in, say, starting the 1600s, but really blossomed in the 1800s. That's when ghosts started being, established, where people started seeing ghosts, and they were thinking that may be tied into the ghost stories they were reading about.
Well, that makes some amount of sense, but doesn't, as far as I recall, weren't the Egyptians, they were very concerned about the afterlife, and I believe the Greeks and Romans were too.
Right. So this is all just speculation, of course. There's no scientific fact in this article. But the final thing that I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. But the final thing they came up with, which I thought was interesting, is they said maybe when we're seeing Bigfoot and people are having Bigfoot sightings, it isn't the fact that they're seeing a Bigfoot, they're seeing ghosts of Neanderthals. Mind blown.
Well, while we're speculating, back to the pig thing. Did they do this experiment with pigs wearing shoes?
Good question. No, they didn't do it with pigs wearing shoes, but they were betting on the fact that the pig's tail would come off the pig. Well, apparently the whole pig experiment just didn't work for them, because when the pig floated down to the bottom of the sea, every crab, shrimp, shark, anything down there just devoured the pig, and it became a pig buffet. So that didn't happen. But what they came up with is that, human bodies deteriorate or decay, and that the legs naturally deteriorated and they washed up, and the shoe kept it buoyant and floated in the natural sea pattern according to the sea waves, or the wave pattern, and wound up on the beach near Vancouver.
Well, and that begs the question, well, why don't we see ghosts of pigs?
There you go. We could be seeing ghosts of pigs. Who knows? Who knows what? One thing I do know, folks, is we're going to be live here every Wednesday night. We've got another show coming up for our folks who are watching us on Facebook Live. You can catch a show with a Bigfoot expert coming up in just a matter of minutes. If you're watching us on YouTube on the recorded version, watch the next episode of our show. That's going to close out this show. Ike, you want to remind them about all of our social media?
I would. We are pretty much everywhere on social media. That means Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Netscape, MySpace, Ask Jeeves, everything.
What about Google Hangout? I got to get on that too. So let's get a page established there. So find us on all there. And if you want to find us on Twitter, we're at road_beyond. That's going to wrap up the show right now. We'll be back with more. I'm Todd Duplantis.
I'm Mike McFadden. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.